Everyday Samurai, Episode 14. Greetings, friends, and welcome to Everyday Samurai, in service to your liberty and the security of a free state. Welcome back for another fun and informative episode. I'm so glad to have you joining us for further explorations of how to build a free society using enlightened warrior principles. I'm sure you've figured out, wherever you might be in your current state of awareness, that as good as things are, they can always be better. There is always a higher level of existence to strive for, to create, and we, humanity, need more self-actualized individuals expressing, creating, and contributing what they have to offer to raise the human condition to the next step. Are you giving what you've got every day, offering what's inside of you, shining your light, and creating value for others? You know, one of the worst things you can do is die with your song left unsung. Take action. Cultivate your talents. Get comfortable with the uncomfortable idea of sharing what you have to offer, because the world needs more change makers, and your own sense of fulfillment depends upon it. If you're someone who understands the principles of justice and martial arts as a system of upholding dignity like we've discussed on previous episodes, then you've undoubtedly noticed that the current state of affairs is far removed from that standard. This should further prompt you to take action because it takes that much more effort to turn the tide against the forces of ignorance and injustice. The most important thing you can do in this regard is to develop your own self-awareness, to foster your entrepreneurial spirit, the action imperative, and to dedicate yourself to being the best person you can be. And that includes your health, your mindset, and your goal orientation. That means your ability to see possibilities and your capacity to make them a reality. If you have any doubts in this area, I advise you get some coaching. everydaysamurai.life/success is a good place to start. Just like training in anything, a little bit every day is the way to get tangible results. I remember the comedian Dennis Miller talking about a guy who took a Tai Chi lesson and wanted to go down to the local biker bar to test out what he had learned. That approach to training is probably not going to work out very well. It's kind of like planting a seed in the ground and digging it up the next day to see how it's growing. Again, persistence and consistency are more effective than hoping to see results from massive one-off efforts. This is why Miyamoto Musashi said that we must make our warrior's walk our everyday walk, and our everyday walk our warrior's walk. It has to become so natural that it's embedded in our very core, so that challenges become opportunities and the path to achieving our goals becomes an exciting adventure. Again, that's everydaysamurai.life/success. Now, if you're the kind of person that trains in Japanese Budo or Bujutsu as a hobby, a mere exercise for health and fitness, a moving meditation as it's sometimes called, or because you enjoy Asian aesthetics or for socializing with friends afterwards, there's little need to look further at the deeper ramification of things martial. However, if you understand that the term martial derives from Mars, the Roman god of war, the study of martial arts is embedded in the clash of human wills and involves killing people and widespread destruction. While normally associated with thunder, and the roles have evolved over time according to various telling of legends, Thor is the Norse deity of war. Interestingly, Thor is also associated with justice and the protection of humanity. The Japanese god of war is Hachiman, or Yahata no Kami, the eight-bannered deity, who is also incorporated into the Buddhist pantheon and deemed a bodhisattva called Hachiman Bosatsu. Hachiman, aside from being the god of war and revered by warriors, is also the divine protector of the Japanese people and is, somewhat ironically, symbolized by a dove. I go into these myths to open a discussion of paradox in our understanding of martial arts. On the one hand, war involves breaking things and killing people. Quote, one big raging atrocity, close quote, as Colonel David Hackworth phrased in his seminal book About Face. Yet war is also waged for the protection of people and the fulfillment of justice, to secure a homeland for people that share an affinity with one another, that are in opposition to an external group. Western traditions use the dove to symbolize peace, yet this also signifies the Japanese god of war. The casual practitioner or observer of martial arts might simply shrug this paradox off and give it no further thought. What about you? Is there a way to resolve these seeming contradictions? Some might phrase the necessary evil of war as being essential to staving off the aggression of others, in service to a greater good, so that a people can live and enjoy their lands, liberty, and property. While this tragedy in furtherance of a greater good theory may be somewhat true, so too is the need to thoroughly understand the reality of war so that it may be used skillfully as a tool in the creation of peace, security, and prosperity. To this end, we are counseled by Sun Tzu, or Sonshi in Japanese, who stated, quote, "One who is skilled in the principles of war subdues the enemy without doing battle, without protracted warfare. His aim must be to take all under heaven intact. Therefore, weapons will not be blunted, and the gains will be intact." And that comes from The Art of War, chapter 3, verses 8 through 10. A thorough reading of Sun Tzu, or Sonshi in Japanese, reveals a preference for preserving life and property, for ending battles and campaigns quickly, and demobilizing armies before their mere presence has an impact on the prices and property of the people warriors are tasked with defending. We've discussed on previous episodes of Everyday Samurai the science of justice, which really just boils down to understanding what is mine versus what is thine, because all conflict is based on the relative scarcity of material goods immediately available for use. This includes our physical bodies and the ground that we occupy, as well as the actions we take with them. So, compelling behavior with these bodies to establish top dog, what is called interest-specific dominance by sociologists, is included in our understanding of justice, the key to which is recognizing the importance of property rights. Property rights are a boundary of social order addressed to others, signifying exclusive use of a specific good or resource. Tall fences make for good neighbors is more than just a simple adage. It is an allusion to the truth that property rights lubricate human interactions so that conflicts over resources do not emerge. Knowing what is off limits because it is already owned by another, what is ours and what we can confidently use or hold without interference, as well as what is available or open to appropriating for use, opens channels for human action, development, and the elevation of human well-being. War, because it involves breaking things and killing people, while in one sense can be conducted to prevent encroachments upon property, territory, or the channels of human action, is a highly inefficient way of protecting property rights and upholding social order. Alternatively, submission to injustice, going along to get along, and avoiding conflict at all costs is a poor way to advance the human condition. Claiming peace when there is no peace is a deceitful practice that opens the door to further injustices and the degradation of human relationships. Trust is a social asset that can only exist when people respect each other, their property, and follow through on the promises they have made. Otherwise, a decivilizing process ensues whereby people cannot believe in the word of others. They cannot confidently take action to improve their lives using their property, or trade with one another because they will constantly be watching their backs, waiting for the other shoe to drop, or living by a screw unto others before they screw you mentality. This is why culture is so important. A society that adopts respect for private property, follows the expected rules of behavior, most notably following through on commitments and not engaging in theft, fraud, or aggression, develops high trust and social bonds. For instance, when I was growing up, the knob on our back door was hardly ever locked. Our neighborhood was a relatively tight-knit community of families that all knew one another. In Japan, even today, it is not uncommon for a dropped wallet to be promptly returned to the nearest koban police box or station office with all of the cash still inside. Contemporary Japan is the clearest example of a high-trust society where crime is low among a homogeneous population. This is undoubtedly due to the social bonds that have developed over several centuries of adjustment and attributable to severe costs for anti-social behavior. Not only were average people subject to warrior rule over 1,000 years, but expectations were reinforced under penalty of social ostracism, collective guilt, and the importance of maintaining a good reputation. The uniqueness of Japanese culture can largely be attributed to geography. As an island nation, controlling immigration and gradual exposure to foreign influence allowed for a measured assimilation of outside people, ideas, goods, and technologies. In modern society, global connectedness and the international division of labor have made unprecedented prosperity available to more people than ever conceived possible before the Industrial Revolution. I am certainly not advocating the closing of borders or prejudicial discrimination. However, acknowledging the revelations of science to include average intelligence, attitudes towards private property and entrepreneurship, as well as trustworthiness, impulsivity, and work ethic vary from population to population. Populations can be classified by race, ethnicity, language, religion, or geographic origin, and there are distinctions among these different classifications that inform us as to which people are amenable or conducive to a high-trust, property-respecting social order. In other words, culture counts, and it counts so much that it is more important than the type or system of government in place. For instance, in 1853, having observed the relative success of the young United States, Argentina adopted a near verbatim copy of the Constitution, translated into Spanish, of course, so that they too could federate their disparate provinces, municipalities, and the autonomous city of Buenos Aires into a republic. On paper, it looks pretty good as legal documents go. However, adherence to the system of government did not follow its ratification. Argentina remained mired in corruption, elections fraud, violent upheaval, coups d'etats, dictatorships, and continual constitutional reformations. Today, The Economist magazine's intelligence unit considers Argentina a flawed democracy, as though democracy is a valid standard. In any case, most Argentinians I know are A, living outside their home country, and B, regale me with the stories of how beautiful and bountiful the land is, yet government corruption and bureaucratic regulations, but I repeat myself, makes it impossible to get ahead. Looking once more to Japan, several times the Yamato court tried to reform the system of government to more closely model the Chinese during the 600s and 700s. Yet the conditions and culture never allowed for it. The court could never enforce its will by way of a centralized conscript army in the way the Chinese rulers did. Japanese geography mandated disparate pockets of civilization separated by forbidding mountain ranges. The only way the Yamato court could exert its mandate outside the capital was through forming vertical alliances with local strongmen, or kuni no miyatsuko as they were called, and later known as konde. These local men were in turn horizontally allied with other warrior houses known as buke, along with their housemen and bannermen known also as gokenin, each with their own quasi-corporate structure. These alliances began as temporary, ad hoc appointments for specific purposes, yet evolved into enduring official yet still mostly private arrangements between individual court nobles and their brawny agents at the local level. In order to collect taxes, administer territories, and protect landholdings, the court, based on personal recommendations from ministers and nobles, relied upon warrior bands under the direction of natural elites. From a modern perspective, informed by the revelations of political economy and subjective analysis, the downfall of this system was the belief in a central authority as the source of law. Of course, early warrior alliances were merely interested in the profit potential provided by court appointments. The relationship between local strongmen and court officials was symbiotic, and competing officials were happy to pit warrior leaders against one another in the quest for advantage. Locals were happy to use court-granted ranks and dispensations as leverage against their challengers. Even historian William Wayne Ferris, in his excellent book Heavenly Warriors from 1995, acknowledges that for local strongmen, offices, positions, and commissions were the, quote, surest route to wealth, arms, and men for centuries of Japanese history, close quote. Universal justice was not even a consideration at the time. The court exerted its will by way of these private warrior alliances so as to collect taxes or tribute on the subjugated and to expand their sphere of control. The first use of the word shogun was a temporary appointment of a warrior leader sent on campaigns of conquest to subdue the Emishi or Ainu native populations in the northeast. Warriors and local elites profited by keeping whatever taxes collected above the minimum tribute due to the Yamato court. They also received additional land grants and exclusive rights to hold and loan out agricultural tools and seed to the peasants. The court was merely a system of distributing spoils among the rulers, and while providing protection services to the rest of the population, both physical and spiritual, was the justification for collecting taxes, the needs, desires, and preferences of the peasants were never taken into account, only dictated upon them. This is why peasants would abandon their farms and flee their domains when taxes and other conditions became too onerous. Protection is nice, in fact, it's a necessity. There will always be requirements for warriors and justice enforcers in society. This, too, is a function of the division of labor that allows for ever-expanding living standards. Yet there is a price for protection services. The science of political economy shows that people make decisions on the margins, within their own little slice of reality, and not based on an entire class of good or service. Everything is a trade-off because individuals are not dealing with absolutes in their daily decisions, even if they are thinking strategically and in the long term. Complete security can never be achieved, and even if it were possible, the costs associated with paying for it would make the level of protection ineffective. So most people have to assume some level of risk in everything that they do. This reminds me of a time that I was discussing a proposal with a former law enforcement friend who had become the vice president for operations of a private security firm in South Florida. He was in negotiations for providing security services to high net worth executives living in Mexico. One of his consultants, a retired CIA operations officer and an Afghanistan veteran, had outlined the capabilities available to be applied to this particular security problem. It included the traditional 3 rings of close protection, inner perimeter and outer perimeter, as well as the 4th perimeter of intelligence collection, staff vetting, periodic investigations on personnel close to the principal. The proposal went on with open source collections, monitoring of indications and warnings, as well as seeding the common paths of travel with undercover operatives to surveil the attitude of people in public opinion about each client, with the idea that protective measures would be adjusted in real time based on the fluctuating level of threat. All in all, it was a comprehensive security package. The proposal concluded with, but who's going to pay for all that? You see, most organizations need to balance security among a host of other needs in order to determine how much they are willing to spend on protecting their assets. They can also mitigate risk by pooling their resources with others, and there are also firms that specialize in providing these kinds of services. This is at the heart of what the insurance industry really is, and because there is a demand for protecting executives that operate in dangerous areas, kidnap and ransom policies exist. The price for these services, reflected in premium payments, also shows that the relative degree of risk these specialists believe living or operating in those areas involves. So prices offer feedback to clients that then inform their decisions as to whether doing business in that area is worth it or not. In this way, the price mechanism informs rational decision-making on security matters. Governments, on the other hand, that derive their resources through taxation, do not make rational decisions informed by market prices. This is why the Secret Service or the State Department's Diplomatic Security Service can provide the type of multi-layered defense described by that retired CIA officer. It's why governments can send officials to areas that have nothing of value to offer the taxpayer. Average people and private firms make decisions on the margin, informed by their resource constraints, which is another way of saying that relative scarcity is factored into market prices. They may have worthy goals and objectives, but are disciplined by the reality of the means under their control. Governments, on the other hand, are resourced through taxation and are therefore unrestrained, undisciplined, and irrational because they can always steal more. Only government bureaucracies can chase after unrealistic, absolute ideals like wars on drugs, poverty, want, making the world safe for democracy, or containing communism. All of these are also myths, no less fanciful and false than the divine right of kings or the divine right to rule. They invite corruption, moral hazard, and ultimately tyranny. This is not to denounce myths outright, because they can be useful if they inspire you to emulate a heroic character to help you get through a dark night of the soul, or to see the wisdom of the highs and lows of the hero's journey. You must be careful and deliberate in the use of myths, even in your own life. Myths can lead you into useless activities and diminish your credibility, like the buffoon Don Quixote, tilting his lance at windmills. In the martial arts community, Aikido has become a laughingstock because of the myths spun from the deification of its founder, Ueshiba O-sensei, and legends of his larger-than-life feats coupled with the foolish belief in immaculate war. This can lead to some personal embarrassment when challenged by a serious fighter, or even severe injury or death when confronted by an acute threat. This might also be tragic, yet in most cases the damage is isolated to the individual deluded by such myths. However, pursuing a mythical ideal is entirely different when done at another's expense. Negative and unintended consequences are sure to result. This is exactly the case when law and justice are based on irrational myths, the most prevalent of which is the belief in political authority. This might be a shocking statement for some, so let me elaborate. But first, let me remind you of the importance your physical fitness has on personal readiness, as well as the ability to deal with stress. Let's face it, we're dealing with some heavy subjects here, and the reality of our times puts a heavy load on the human mind and body. You need to take action toward wringing the accumulation of mental stress, poor posture, and physical imbalances through regular wear and tear out from your body. And that's why I've committed to a regular yoga practice, but for most people, traditional yoga can be quite boring and more of a hassle than it's worth. That's why you need a program that's adapted to the needs of modern warriors. Go to everydaysamurai.life/progress and check out the Progressive Yoga program. With Progressive Yoga, you can restore the resting length and resiliency of your connective tissues, bring your body into alignment, and shred fat in under 30 minutes in an expertly instructed and fun workout. This is the yoga program you need. Go to everydaysamurai.life/progress today. As we've previously discussed, and you can find direct references in Egan's show, The Book of Dignity, the real purpose of martial arts is not merely self-defense, but the art of government. That is, war in matters of foreign policy and justice in matters of domestic policy, to secure peaceful enjoyment of our lives, liberties, and property amongst our neighbors. Good government can only rationally be put into effect through the recognition and maintenance of unassailable property rights, because they are the only clearly defined borders by which everyone can recognize when a violation has occurred. It's as simple as seeing when someone has crossed over a line. Now, defining those property lines and verifying the legitimacy of a title, as well as investigating the details of alleged violations, may be complex. And this is why specialists in the fields of law, justice, and security are necessary. Moreover, various fields of law, such as real estate, corporate, maritime, cyber, or international commerce, etc., require even greater specialization. This too only indicates further why law, justice, and security monopolies cannot deliver adequate services, and the field needs to be open to consumer choice. However, the greatest advance in governance occurred in 1776 when the colonies of North America violently seceded from England. This was the first time a foundational legal charter recognized that government existed solely to protect the pre-existing rights of its constituents. To get some further perspective, let's take a look at what geopolitical analyst and author of the Early Warning Report newsletter, Richard Mayberry, wrote about the uniqueness of the American Revolution. It starts with the fall of the Roman Empire. Quote, "After Roman civilization in Western Europe fell apart around 500 AD, that area was taken over by hundreds of independent cutthroats called feudal lords. Each set up his own little kingdom of a square mile or so with a castle at the center. The people on this tiny estate were the lord's property, his serfs, to be taxed, regulated, and killed as he saw fit. This was the Dark Ages, a time of starvation, endless war, ignorance, and bottomless misery. The Roman legal system had died along with the empire, so Europe had no law. Two people embroiled in a dispute had to work it out on their own. The feudal lord seldom paid much attention. He didn't care as long as the taxes kept rolling in. When a dispute occurred, often there was bloodshed. In order to avoid this, participants in disputes would increasingly call on neutral third parties to hear both sides of their stories and make decisions. Usually, the most trusted person in a community was a clergyman, and some clergymen made careers of hearing disputes and making judgments. They became judges. Being clergymen, these judges' decisions in each case were based on religious principles such as "thou shalt not steal" and "thou shalt not kill." Decisions were preserved in writing as precedents for later decisions. This collection of precedents became a body of case law, law derived from actual cases. One problem: often people were from different religions. Which principles should a judge apply? Judges hit on the idea of using the principles all religions hold in common. There are two. Number one, do all you have agreed to do. This became the basis of contract law. Number two, do not encroach on other persons or their property. This became the basis of tort law and some criminal law. These two laws taught by every religion were held to be common to all persons, and they became the foundation of the body of precedents called common law. Another problem: governments hated these two fundamental laws. They wanted the privilege of breaking agreements, stealing, killing, and doing whatever else they pleased. Right from the beginning, there was conflict between governments and common law. These judges were under extreme pressure to make exceptions for public officials. This is the meaning of the so-called divine right of kings. Governments declared that although they were as human as everyone else, God had given them the special right to violate the two fundamental laws. The modern version of the divine right of kings is what is known as the divine right of the majority. In democracies, it is held that the government can do anything it pleases if the majority or their representatives vote for it. Thanks to the divine right of kings, the heavy taxes, regulations, and wars kept the people in crushing poverty. In England, a huge underground economy sprang up to escape the taxes and regulations. Finally, after 1492, shipbuilding advanced enough for people to cross the ocean to America to escape their governments, and thousands did. England's underground economy was transplanted to America, where it flourished. Virtually every adult was engaged in smuggling or tax evasion of one sort or another. The early Americans hated the government's political law, but in regard to common law were probably some of the most law-abiding people ever to walk the earth. They were not perfect, but they had, after all, risked their lives crossing the ocean to live under the principles of this law. These principles came not from a legislature of crooked politicians, but from their religions. By 1765, enjoying very little taxation or regulation, Americans had become the wealthiest population on earth. Government officials in England decided to tap into this wealth. They sent tax collectors. The tax collectors were tarred and feathered. They then sent troops to protect the tax collectors. At Lexington and Concord in 1775, the troops arrived to confiscate the American colonists' guns. The colonists decided to fight. Then, in 1776, the colonists overthrew their government and, in their Declaration of Independence, said, "All men are created equal. No special privileges, everyone obeys the fundamental laws." After the 1776 Revolution, the American founders set up a new government with a Constitution and Bill of Rights based on the two essential laws. The size and power of this government was severely limited, and its ability to steal, i.e. tax, was reduced almost to zero. Until the 20th century, the tiny U.S. government was supported only by import taxes and taxes on liquor and tobacco. There was no income tax. America became a haven for flight capital as people all over the world began investing their savings here. With this mountain of capital to work, new businesses sprang up like mushrooms, and inventors such as Robert Fulton and Eli Whitney were able to acquire funds to develop a vast array of new machines to make life better. This is where we get the term American ingenuity. When he died in 1931, Thomas Edison had more than 1,000 patents. This mountain of capital also enabled industrialists to produce and sell these new items at prices everyone could afford, while paying the world's highest wages. America still had a lot of flaws, the worst being slavery and the genocide of the Indians. But it was the freest, most prosperous land ever known. The Old World remains so wretchedly poor that archaeological evidence from American slave dwellings shows that Europe's heavily taxed and regulated middle class did not live as well as America's slaves. The rest of the world saw America's great wealth and liberty and wanted it for themselves. In the 1800s, millions came here, and millions more stayed at home and fought to limit their governments. The principles of the 1776 Revolution did not remain confined to the U.S. They began to spread around the globe. The nations where they were adopted came to be known as the free world. These nations are also the richest. Liberty is the source of prosperity. Close quote. Friends, dispensing with the myth of political authority and standing ready to protect the principles of liberty for everyone is what Everyday Samurai is all about. It begins in mind and most certainly will follow in form because that too is an unfailing principle. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Everyday Samurai and look forward to seeing you next time. Be sure to subscribe to our feed so as to stay up to date with our newest offerings. If you like what you've heard here, give us a thumbs up or a 5-star review. Share it with a friend or someone you think would benefit from the message. Remember to get our Tactical Pen Basics Manual as a bonus with the purchase of any tactical pen at shop.everydaysamurai.life. You'll get a great tool for your everyday carry and some great info on mindset, training, and tactics as well. That's shop.everydaysamurai.life. Get yours today and carry it with you wherever you go. Until next time, stay sharp, stay aware, and be well.